The gunshot echoed through the Miami warehouse as Marina pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Blood trickled down her temple where the bullet had grazed her, but that wasn't what terrified her most. It was the deadly calm in Adriano Esposito's voice as he spoke into the darkness. "You made one mistake, Sullivan," his Italian accent cutting through the silence like a blade. "You touched what belongs to me." Marina's breath caught. 3 months ago, she was just a struggling Brazilian nursing student who had sat with a confused elderly man in Bayfront Park, never imagining that simple act of kindness would drag her into the violent world of the Miami Mafia, never imagining she would fall for the most dangerous man in the city. "She doesn't belong to you, Esposito." James Sullivan's voice rang out from somewhere in the shadows. "She's just some immigrant girl who got in too deep." The sound of Adriano's footsteps grew closer, measured and lethal. Marina knew that look in his dark eyes, the same look that had both terrified and captivated her from the moment they first met. Tonight, one of them wouldn't leave this warehouse alive. Welcome to Passion and Power, where dangerous love stories unfold in the shadows of power. If you're ready for a tale of forbidden romance between worlds that should never collide, you're in the right place. Comment below which city you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us as we bring you the most intense love stories you'll ever hear. 3 months earlier, Marina Silva's life was falling apart, one unpaid bill at a time. She clutched her worn leather purse tighter as she walked through the gleaming lobby of the Sunset Manor assisted living facility, her sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floors. The contrast between this place and her cramped studio apartment in Little Havana couldn't have been starker. Here, everything screamed money, from the crystal chandeliers to the imported Italian furniture that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. "Marina, room 314 needs attention," Nancy called from behind the nurse's station, barely looking up from her computer. "Mr. Henderson is asking for you specifically." Marina nodded, forcing a smile despite the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. She'd been working double shifts for weeks, trying to scrape together enough money for next semester's tuition, while her student visa ticked toward its expiration date, like a time bomb. 6 more months. That's all she had left to figure out how to stay in America legally, or she'd be shipped back to Brazil with nothing but debt and broken dreams. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she made her rounds, checking on her elderly patients with the same gentle care she'd learned from her grandmother back in São Paulo. These people reminded her of home, of family she'd lost, of the life she'd left behind chasing a better future that seemed more impossible each day. By 7 p.m., Marina's feet ached and her back screamed for relief. She gathered her things from the small employee locker, counting the crumpled bills in her wallet. $43, enough for groceries if she was careful, but not enough to cover the electricity bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. The bus ride back to Little Havana took 40 minutes through Miami's evening traffic. Marina stared out the window at the city lights, watching wealthy neighborhoods give way to her reality. Small houses with barred windows, corner stores with flickering neon signs, and the constant underlying tension of people struggling to survive. She got off at her usual stop and began the 6-block walk home, but something made her pause at the entrance to Bayfront Park. Maybe it was the way the setting sun painted the water gold, or maybe she just needed a moment to breathe before facing her empty apartment and the stack of bills on her kitchen table. The park was mostly empty except for a few joggers and tourists taking selfies with the Miami skyline. Marina found a bench facing the water and sat down, allowing herself this small luxury of peace. That's when she noticed him. An elderly man sat alone on a bench about 30 feet away, wearing an expensive-looking grey suit that seemed out of place in the casual park setting. His silver hair was perfectly styled, but his face held a confusion that made Marina's heart clench with recognition. She'd seen that look before, on her patients at the manor when they forgot where they were or couldn't remember how they'd gotten somewhere. The man kept looking around frantically, then down at his hands, then back at the water. He was speaking to himself in what sounded like Italian mixed with English, his voice carrying a note of panic that made Marina stand up without thinking. She approached slowly, the way she'd been trained to approach confused patients. "Excuse me, sir, are you okay?" The man looked up at her with startled brown eyes that seemed both ancient and childlike. "Non so dove sono," he said, then switched to heavily accented English. "I don't know. Where is my grandson? Marco? No. Adriano. Where is Adriano?" Marina's heart went out to him. She sat down carefully on the bench beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "What's your name, sir?" "Salvatore," he said, his hands shaking slightly. "Salvatore Esposito. I was walking and then—" His face crumpled with confusion. "I don't remember. The house, it was so big and I needed air, but now—" "It's okay, Salvatore," Marina said gently, pulling a bottle of water from her purse. "Here, drink this. We'll figure this out together." For the next hour, Marina sat with the elderly man as he drifted between lucidity and confusion. Sometimes he spoke clearly about his grandson Adriano, describing him as a good boy who works too hard. Other times he seemed to think he was back in Sicily, talking about olive groves and his late wife Rosa. Marina didn't understand all the Italian words, but she understood loneliness and fear. She held Salvatore's hand when he got agitated, and spoke to him in the same soothing voice she used with her patients. When he grew tired, she let him rest his head against her shoulder while she kept watch. As the sun began to set, Marina knew she had to do something. She carefully took a photo of Salvatore and posted it on her Facebook account with a message in both English and Spanish, asking if anyone knew this man or his family. It was a long shot, but social media had reunited families before. 20 minutes later, her phone exploded with notifications. The first call came from a number she didn't recognize. "You found him?" a deep male voice demanded without preamble. The accent was Italian-American, rough with emotion and something that might have been relief. Yes, I think so. Are you Adriano? Where are you?" The voice was sharp, commanding in a way that made Marina's spine straighten instinctively. "Bayfront Park, near the amphitheater. He's safe, just confused. Don't move. I'm coming." The line went dead, leaving Marina staring at her phone. Something about that voice made her nervous, but Salvatore had perked up at the mention of his grandson's name. "Adriano is coming?" the old man asked, his eyes clearing for a moment. "Yes, he's coming to get you." Salvatore smiled, patting her hand. "You are a good girl, an angel. Adriano will like you." Marina wasn't so sure about that, especially when 3 black SUVs pulled up to the park entrance 15 minutes later. Men in expensive suits got out, scanning the area with the kind of professional alertness that made her stomach drop. This wasn't a normal family pickup. Then she saw him. Adriano Esposito stepped out of the middle vehicle like he owned not just the car, but the entire city around it. He was tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of build that spoke of both gym time and real-world strength. His black hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and when he turned in her direction, Marina felt her breath catch. He wore a crisp white dress shirt with the top 4 buttons undone, revealing a muscular chest and a glimpse of an intricate tattoo on the side of his neck. A gold Rolex caught the light on his wrist as he moved with predatory grace toward their bench. But it was his eyes that made Marina's heart race, dark brown, almost black, and filled with an intensity that seemed to see straight through her. This was no ordinary businessman. This was danger in an expensive suit. And she was about to find out just how deep that danger ran. Adriano Esposito had built his empire on control, but the sight of his grandfather sitting peacefully next to a beautiful stranger made every carefully constructed wall around his heart crack just a little. For 6 hours, he'd mobilized every resource at his disposal. His men had combed through Miami with military precision, checking hospitals, police stations, and every corner where an elderly man might wander. He'd called in favors from contacts in law enforcement, activated surveillance networks, and even considered involving the FBI if it meant finding Salvatore safely. The fear that had clawed at his chest during those endless hours was something he hadn't felt since he was 12 years old, watching his parents' funeral from behind his grandfather's protective embrace. Salvatore was the only family he had left, the man who'd raised him, taught him everything about honor and strength and what it meant to be a man. Now, seeing his grandfather safe and calm beside this woman, Adriano felt a mixture of relief and curiosity that caught him off guard. She was beautiful, but not in the artificial way of the women who usually threw themselves at him. Her long dark hair fell in natural waves around her shoulders, and her olive skin suggested Latin heritage. She wore simple jeans and a pale blue sweater that had seen better days, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her more attractive than any designer dress could have. What struck him most was the way she held Salvatore's hand, gentle, protective, like she genuinely cared about a stranger's well-being. "Adriano!" Salvatore's face lit up as his grandson approached. "This is Marina. She's an angel who stayed with me when I was lost." Marina stood up slowly, and Adriano noticed how she positioned herself slightly in front of his grandfather, as if ready to protect him if necessary. The gesture was small but telling. This woman had good instincts. "Thank you," Adriano said, his voice rougher than he intended. Up close, she was even more stunning, with warm brown eyes that seemed to look right into his soul. "I can't tell you what this means to me." "He's a sweet man," Marina replied, her accent marking her as Brazilian. "He was just confused about where he was." "I couldn't leave him alone." Andre stepped forward from behind Adriano, his hand resting casually near his jacket. "Boss, we should get Mr. Salvatore home. Robert's waiting to check him over." Marina's eyes sharpened at the word boss, and Adriano saw the exact moment she began to understand that this wasn't a normal family situation. Her body language shifted subtly, becoming more guarded, although she didn't move away from Salvatore. "Of course," she said carefully, "I'm glad he's safe." She started to step back, but Salvatore caught her hand. "No, no, you must come to dinner. Marina, you saved me. Adriano, she must come to dinner." "Nonno," Adriano said gently, using the Italian word for grandfather. "I'm sure Marina has her own plans. I insist," Salvatore said with the stubborn authority that had built the Esposito family fortune decades ago. "She is family now. Family takes care of family." Adriano watched Marina's face carefully. He could see her weighing options, probably wondering what kind of family traveled with armed security, and called each other boss. "Smart girl." "That's very kind," Marina said diplomatically. "But I should really get home. I have work tomorrow." "Where do you work?" Adriano found himself asking, genuinely curious about this woman who'd shown such kindness to his grandfather. "Sunset Manor. I'm a nursing assistant." She paused, then added quietly, "And I'm studying to be a registered nurse." The pieces clicked into place for Adriano. Her gentle manner with Salvatore, her instinctive care. She was trained for this. But more than that, she was struggling. He could see it in the worn edges of her clothes, the careful way she spoke about work, the exhaustion around her eyes. "Rico," he called to his driver, "bring the car around. We're taking Marina home." "That's not necessary," Marina started. "It's the least I can do," Adriano interrupted. "Please, let me thank you properly for taking care of my grandfather." Marina looked between Adriano and Salvatore, clearly torn. The old man was watching her with hopeful eyes, and Adriano could see her resolve weakening. "Just a ride home," she said finally. "I live in Little Havana." Adriano nodded, though something twisted in his chest at the mention of that neighborhood. Little Havana was worlds away from his Coral Gables mansion, a place where people struggled just to survive, while he controlled millions of dollars in both legitimate and illegitimate enterprises. The ride to Marina's neighborhood was quiet, except for Salvatore's occasional comments about the city lights. Adriano found himself stealing glances at Marina, who sat beside his grandfather with natural ease, answering his questions about her work and her life in Miami. "I came here 3 years ago," she was saying. "My parents died in a car accident, and I wanted to start over somewhere new." "Ah, you understand loss," Salvatore said, patting her hand. "Adriano's parents died when he was young, too. We understand each other. We who have lost family." Adriano saw Marina glance at him with new understanding, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. When they reached her address, Adriano was shocked by the contrast. The building was old, with peeling paint and security bars on the windows. This was survival living, not the comfortable life he'd assumed she had. Thank you again, Marina said as Rico opened her door. Take care of yourself, Salvatore. Wait, Adriano said, stepping out of the car. He pulled out his wallet and extracted several $100 bills. Please, for your time, for what you did. Marina's expression hardened immediately. I don't want your money. It's not charity. Yes, it is. Her voice was firm, but not angry. I helped your grandfather because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected payment. Keep your money, Mr. Esposito. She turned to walk away, but Salvatore called out from the car window. Marina, tomorrow you come for dinner, 7 o'clock. I will cook my Rosa's recipe for osso buco. Marina paused, looking back at the elderly man's hopeful face. Salvatore. Please, the old man said. An old man gets lonely. Adriano works too much and I miss having someone to cook for. Adriano watched the internal battle play out on Marina's face. She was smart enough to know his family was dangerous, but kind enough to care about his grandfather's loneliness. One dinner, she said finally, but I take the bus. I don't need a ride. As she disappeared into her building, Adriano stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, staring up at the dim light that appeared in a third-floor window. She's different, Andre observed quietly. Yes, Adriano agreed, his mind already working through the implications. She is. What he didn't say was that different was exactly what terrified him. In his world, caring about someone was a weakness enemies could exploit. But as he got back into the car and watched Marina's silhouette move behind her curtains, Adriano realized he was already in more danger than he'd ever been in his life. And for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't sure he wanted to be safe. Marina spent the entire next day questioning her sanity. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of the previous evening in her mind. The way Adriano had looked at her, the obvious wealth and power that surrounded him, the careful way his men had watched everything with predatory alertness, all of it screamed danger. But then she remembered Salvatore's gentle smile, the way he'd held her hand when he was confused and scared, and her resolve weakened all over again. You're distracted today, Nancy observed as Marina mechanically checked Mr. Henderson's blood pressure for the second time. Everything okay? Just tired, Marina lied, forcing herself to focus on her work. She couldn't exactly explain that she'd accidentally gotten involved with what was obviously a crime family. The day dragged endlessly. Every time her phone buzzed, Marina's heart jumped, half expecting another call from Adriano's commanding voice. But 6 o'clock came and went without any contact, leaving her staring at her reflection in the employee bathroom mirror, trying to decide if she was relieved or disappointed. She should go home, heat up leftover rice and beans, study for her pharmacology exam, and forget all about dark-eyed Italian men and their lonely grandfathers. Instead, she found herself on a bus heading toward Coral Gables at 6:30. The Esposito mansion sat behind iron gates that probably cost more than Marina made in a year. She stood on the sidewalk for a full 5 minutes, staring up at the Mediterranean-style villa with its perfectly manicured gardens and circular driveway, wondering what the hell she was doing. A man in a black suit, not one she'd seen the night before, approached the gate from inside the property. Miss Silva? Yes. Mr. Esposito is expecting you. The gate swung open silently, and Marina walked up the curved driveway on shaking legs. The house was even more intimidating up close, all arched windows and imported stone that spoke of old money and older power. Rico answered the front door before she could knock. Miss Marina, welcome. Mr. Salvatore is in the kitchen. Marina followed him through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that looked like they should be in museums. The contrast to her cramped studio apartment was so stark it made her feel dizzy. The kitchen, at least, felt more human. Salvatore stood at a massive stove, stirring something that smelled incredible, wearing an apron that read, "World's Best Nonno" in faded letters. "Marina!" His face lit up like she'd just made his entire year. Perfect timing. The osso buco is almost ready. It smells amazing, Marina said, genuinely touched by the effort he'd put in. Can I help with anything? Sit. You are guest, Salvatore waved her toward a breakfast nook that overlooked the pool area. Adriano will be down soon. He had business calls. Marina's stomach fluttered at the mention of Adriano's name, which was ridiculous. She was here for Salvatore, not his dangerous grandson. "Tell me about your family in Brazil," Salvatore said as he bustled around the kitchen. "You have brothers, sisters?" "No. It was just me and my parents. They owned a small restaurant in Sao Paulo." Marina smiled sadly. "My mother taught me to cook, but nothing as fancy as this." "Cooking is love," Salvatore said firmly. "Fancy doesn't matter. Love matters." They were deep in conversation about family recipes when Adriano appeared in the kitchen doorway. Marina's breath caught despite her best efforts to remain unaffected. He'd changed from his business suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that hugged his muscular frame. His hair was slightly messed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and the casual look somehow made him even more attractive than the intimidating businessman from the night before. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his eyes finding Marina's immediately. "Business ran long." "No problem," Marina managed, hyper-aware of how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Salvatore regaled them with stories from his youth in Sicily, his eyes bright with memories of a simpler time. Adriano was quieter, but Marina caught him watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Marina is studying to be a nurse," Salvatore announced proudly, as if she were already part of the family. "Very smart girl. She takes care of people." "That's admirable," Adriano said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "What made you choose nursing?" Marina hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My grandmother was sick for a long time before she died. The nurses who cared for her they were angels. They made her last months bearable, gave her dignity. I wanted to do that for other people." Something shifted in Adriano's expression, a recognition maybe, or understanding. "That's a beautiful reason." After dinner, Salvatore insisted on showing Marina his garden, leaving her and Adriano alone in the kitchen as they cleaned up. "You don't have to do that," Adriano said as Marina started loading the dishwasher. "Carmen usually handles the cleanup." "I don't mind helping." Marina continued rinsing plates, hyper-aware of Adriano moving around the kitchen behind her. "Your grandfather is wonderful. You're lucky to have him." "I know." Adriano's voice was closer now, and Marina turned to find him standing just a few feet away holding a dish towel. "He's all the family I have left." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This was the same man who'd commanded a small army of security the night before, but right now he just looked like a grandson who loved his grandfather. "He talks about you constantly," Marina said softly. "He's very proud of you." Adriano's laugh was bitter. "He shouldn't be. The things I've done, the life I live. It's not something to be proud of." Marina studied his face, seeing the conflict there. "What kind of business are you in, Adriano?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Adriano's expression shuttered, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the dangerous boss. "The kind you don't want to know about," he said finally. Before Marina could respond, Andre appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face grim. "Boss, we have a problem. Sullivan's making moves in South Beach. 3 of our establishments were hit tonight." The transformation in Adriano was instant and terrifying. His entire demeanor shifted, becoming cold and predatory in a way that made Marina step back instinctively. "How bad?" Adriano's voice was deadly calm. "No casualties on our side, but he's sending a message. Rico's got the car ready." Adriano nodded, then turned to Marina. His dark eyes were apologetic but firm. "Andre will drive you home. I can take the bus." "No." The word was absolute, brooking no argument. "It's not safe for you to be on the streets alone tonight," Marina wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. This wasn't about control. This was about genuine concern for her safety. Salvatore returned from the garden as they were preparing to leave, his face falling when he realized Marina was going. "But we were going to have coffee and play cards," he protested. "Next time, nonno," Adriano said gently, kissing his grandfather's cheek. "I promise." The ride back to Little Havana was tense. Andre kept checking his mirrors, and Marina could feel the weight of whatever was happening in Adriano's world pressing down on all of them. "Miss Marina," Andre said as they pulled up to her building, "maybe it's better if you don't come around for a while. Things are complicated right now." Marina nodded, understanding the warning. She was getting too close to something dangerous, and smart people stayed away from danger. But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Marina couldn't shake the image of Salvatore's disappointed face or the conflict she'd seen in Adriano's eyes. Whatever world he lived in, whatever terrible things he might do, there was still a man underneath who loved his grandfather and worried about keeping people safe. And despite every logical thought in her head, Marina was already planning when she could see them again. She had no idea that across town, James Sullivan was planning exactly the same thing. Marina didn't hear from the Espositos for 3 days, and the silence felt like a physical ache. She threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts and studying until her eyes burned, but nothing could distract her from the memory of Salvatore's warm smile, or the way Adriano had looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. On Thursday evening, as she was leaving Sunset Manor, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Marina?" The voice was elderly, shaky with distress. "Salvatore? How did you get my number?" "I found it. Adriano wrote it down. Marina, I need help. I'm lost again." Marina's heart clenched. "Where are you? Can you see any street signs?" There's a big building with lights and water. I can smell the ocean." Marina closed her eyes, trying to think. "Are you downtown, near the port?" Yes, I think so. But Marina, there are men here. Bad men. They're looking for me." Ice flooded Marina's veins. "Salvatore, listen to me very carefully. Find somewhere safe to hide, a store, a restaurant, anywhere with people. I'm coming to get you." "Don't call Adriano," Salvatore pleaded. "He has enough worry. Just come, please." Marina was already running toward the bus stop. "I'm on my way. Stay hidden." The bus ride to downtown felt eternal. Marina's hands shook as she tried calling Salvatore back, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She should call Adriano, she knew that, but Salvatore had sounded so desperate, so afraid of being a burden. The port area at night was a different world from the tourist-friendly daytime version. Shadows stretched between warehouses, and the few people on the streets moved with purpose that suggested they weren't there for sightseeing. Marina found Salvatore huddled behind a food truck, his expensive suit making him stand out like a beacon in the rough neighborhood. His eyes were wild with confusion and fear. "Marina, thank God!" He grabbed her hands with desperate relief. "The men, they were asking about me, about Adriano. It's okay, you're safe now," Marina soothed, though her own heart was racing. "Let's get you home." As they walked toward the main street to catch a taxi, Marina noticed the black sedan that had been parked across from the food truck was now following them slowly. Her blood turned to ice. "Salvatore, we need to move faster," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. But it was too late. The sedan pulled up beside them and 3 men got out. The leader was tall and pale with cold blue eyes and an Irish accent that confirmed Marina's worst fears. Well, Salvatore Esposito out for an evening stroll?" James Sullivan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "And who's this lovely lady?" "Leave her alone," Salvatore said, his confusion clearing as protective instincts kicked in. "She's not part of this." "Oh, but I think she is." Sullivan's eyes raked over Marina with calculating interest. "The Brazilian girl who's been spending time at the Esposito mansion, Adriano's new pet." Marina stepped protectively in front of Salvatore, her mind racing. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just found him wandering—" "Don't lie to me, sweetheart." Sullivan's voice turned dangerous. "We've been watching. You're exactly what I need to send a message to that Italian bastard." One of Sullivan's men moved toward them, but Salvatore surprised everyone by pulling a small pistol from his jacket. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. "I may be old, but I'm still Salvatore Esposito. Touch her and die." Sullivan laughed. "The old lion still has claws, but you're outnumbered, Salvatore, and that girl is coming with us whether you like it or not." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Marina could feel Salvatore trembling beside her, could see the calculation in Sullivan's eyes as he weighed his options. Then her phone rang. Adriano's name flashed on the screen, and Sullivan's smile widened. "Answer it. Tell him where you are." Marina's finger hovered over the accept button. If she answered, she'd be dragging Adriano into a trap. If she didn't, Sullivan would probably kill both her and Salvatore right here on the street. "Answer it," Sullivan repeated, his gun now pointed at Salvatore's chest. Marina accepted the call with shaking fingers. "Adriano?" "Marina, thank God. Nonno's missing again, and his GPS tracker shows he's near the port. Are you—" "I'm with him," Marina interrupted, hoping Adriano would hear the fear in her voice. "We're at the port near Warehouse District. Adriano, don't—" Sullivan snatched the phone away. "Hello, Esposito. I have something that belongs to you. Two somethings, actually." Marina couldn't hear Adriano's response, but she could imagine the deadly fury in his voice. "Here's what's going to happen," Sullivan continued. "You're going to come alone to Warehouse 47. No backup, no weapons, no clever plans. Just you, or I start sending pieces of your grandfather back to you. Oh, and I'll keep the girl for myself. She's quite lovely." Sullivan ended the call and tossed Marina's phone into the harbor. "Now we wait, and hope your boyfriend values you enough to walk into an obvious trap." They were forced into the sedan and driven to an abandoned warehouse that smelled of rust and old fish. Sullivan's men tied Marina and Salvatore to chairs, while Sullivan paced, checking his watch obsessively. "He'll come," Salvatore said quietly to Marina. "Adriano never abandons family." "I'm not family," Marina whispered back. Salvatore's eyes were sad, but knowing. "You are to him. That's why you're in danger." 20 minutes later, the warehouse door opened, and Adriano walked in alone. He wore all black, his hands visible and empty, but Marina had never seen anything more terrifying than the controlled rage in his dark eyes. "Let them go, Sullivan," Adriano said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, but this is so much more fun," Sullivan replied. "You see, I've learned something interesting about you, Esposito. You've developed a weakness. This little Brazilian nurse has gotten under your skin." Adriano's eyes found Marina's across the warehouse, and she saw something in them that made her heart stop. It wasn't just concern or even affection. It was love. "You're right," Adriano said quietly. "She has." Sullivan's laughter echoed off the walls. "How touching. Too bad she's about to pay for your sins." But as Sullivan raised his gun toward Marina, Adriano smiled, a cold, predatory expression that promised death. "You made one mistake, Sullivan," he said, his Italian accent cutting through the darkness like a blade. "You assumed I came alone." The warehouse exploded into chaos as Andre and Rico burst through hidden entrances, gunfire erupting from all directions. Marina threw herself sideways, taking the chair with her as bullets flew overhead. Through the noise and confusion, she heard Adriano's voice, deadly calm and absolutely certain. "You touched what belongs to me. Now you die." The gunfight lasted less than 3 minutes, but to Marina it felt like hours. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, pressed against the cold concrete floor with her hands still zip-tied behind her back, listening to the terrifying symphony of gunshots and shouted commands. When silence finally fell, she was afraid to look up, afraid of what she might see. "Marina." Adriano's voice was soft, urgent, and very close. "Marina, look at me." She opened her eyes to find him kneeling beside her, his face pale with concern. There was blood on his white shirt, but he seemed unharmed as he carefully cut her restraints with a knife that appeared from somewhere in his jacket. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. "I'm okay," Marina managed, though her voice shook. "Salvatore—" "I'm fine, cara mia," the elderly man called from across the warehouse where Rico was freeing him from his chair. "These old bones are tougher than they look." Marina looked around the warehouse and immediately wished she hadn't. Sullivan's men lay motionless on the concrete, and Sullivan himself sat slumped against a shipping container, very obviously dead. The metallic smell of blood mixed with the harbor's salt air made her stomach lurch. "Don't look," Adriano said firmly, blocking her view with his body. "Andre, get the car. We need to leave. Now." "What about—" Marina gestured weakly toward the bodies. "It's handled," Adriano said in a tone that suggested she shouldn't ask for details. Can you walk? Marina nodded, though her legs felt like jelly as Adriano helped her stand. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and overwhelmed by the reality of what had just happened. People were dead. She'd been kidnapped by the Irish Mafia. Adriano had killed for her. The ride back to the mansion passed in a blur. Salvatore held her hand in the back seat, while Adriano made quiet phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice cold and businesslike as he dealt with the aftermath of the warehouse. Marina caught enough words to understand he was arranging clean-up, alibis, and what sounded like retaliation against the remaining Sullivan organization. This was his world. Violence and death and casual conversations about disposing of bodies, and somehow, impossibly, she was part of it now. At the mansion, Carmen fussed over both Marina and Salvatore, while Robert examined them for injuries. Marina sat numbly in the living room, accepting a cup of tea she didn't want, while Adriano paced like a caged predator. "This is my fault," he said suddenly, his voice rough with self-recrimination. "I should have increased security after the first attacks. I should have known Sullivan would target Nonno." "You couldn't have known," Marina said quietly. Adriano turned to her, his dark eyes blazing. "I should have stayed away from you. The moment I realized what you meant to me, I should have cut all contact. Instead, I was selfish, and you nearly died because of it." The words hit Marina like a physical blow. "What I meant to you?" Adriano stopped pacing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You know what you mean to me. You've known since that first night. Tell me anyway." Marina set down her teacup and stood, facing him across the elegant living room. "Say it." For a moment, Adriano looked like he might refuse. Then his shoulders sagged and the mask of the dangerous boss slipped away, leaving just a man who was terrified of losing what mattered most. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your kindness, your strength, the way you care for people without expecting anything in return. I love how you make my grandfather smile, how you see good in a world that's shown you mostly struggle. I love you so much it terrifies me, because loving someone in my world is a death sentence for them." Marina felt tears prick her eyes. "Adriano, no." He held up a hand, stopping her. "You need to understand what this means, what I am. I'm not a businessman, Marina. I'm the head of a crime family. I control territory, collect debts, and eliminate threats. I've killed people with my own hands. The money that paid for this house, for everything you see here, it comes from illegal activities that would horrify you if you knew the details." Marina absorbed this, though part of her had already known. "And you think that changes how I feel about you?" Adriano's expression was pained. "It should. Well, it doesn't." Marina stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Do you think I'm stupid, Adriano? Do you think I didn't figure out what kind of man travels with armed guards and has enemies who kidnap people? Then why?" "Because I've seen who you really are." Marina reached up to touch his face, feeling him lean into her palm despite himself. "I've seen how gentle you are with your grandfather, how you worry about keeping people safe, how you hate that your world puts the people you love in danger. I've seen your heart, Adriano, and it's beautiful." Adriano caught her hand, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. "You don't understand the life you'd be choosing. The constant danger, the isolation, the fact that you could never have a normal relationship or a normal future." "What's normal?" Marina asked. "I'm an illegal immigrant working 2 jobs to pay for a degree I might never finish because my visa's expiring. I have no family, no safety net, no guarantee of anything. At least with you, I'd have love." "Marina." "I love you too," she interrupted. "I love your strength and your vulnerability, the way you'd die to protect the people you care about. I love that you built an empire but still make time to have dinner with your grandfather. I love that you see me as something precious when the rest of the world sees me as disposable." Adriano stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. Then, as if a dam had burst, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with desperate intensity. The kiss was everything. Relief and passion and promise and fear all rolled into one overwhelming moment. Marina melted against him, feeling like she'd finally found the place she belonged, even if that place was in the arms of the most dangerous man in Miami. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adriano rested his forehead against hers. "If you stay," he said quietly, "there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and I'll protect you with my life, but you'll also be a target for every enemy I have. Are you sure you can live with that?" Marina thought about her empty apartment, her uncertain future, the loneliness that had been her constant companion since her parents' death. Then she thought about Salvatore's warm smile, about the way Adriano looked at her like she was his entire world, about the family she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. "I'm sure," she said, "but I have one condition." Adriano raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with a mafia boss." Marina smiled. "I want to finish nursing school. I want to keep helping people, even if it's just part-time." "That's who I am, Adriano. Don't ask me to give that up." Adriano's smile was soft and proud. "I wouldn't dream of it. The world needs more angels, and I'm selfish enough to want to keep one all to myself." From the doorway, Salvatore's voice interrupted them. "Finally! I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever." They turned to find the elderly man beaming at them, his eyes bright with joy and relief. "Now," Salvatore continued, "when do I get great-grandchildren?" Marina buried her face in Adriano's chest, laughing despite everything they'd been through. This was her family now, dangerous and complicated and absolutely perfect, and she'd never been happier in her life. Years later, Marina would look back on that night in the warehouse as the moment her real life began. The nursing degree she'd fought so hard for hung on the wall of the clinic Adriano had built for her in Little Havana, a place where immigrants could receive medical care without questions about documentation or ability to pay. It was her dream made real, funded by money that came from sources she chose not to examine too closely. Their wedding had been small but perfect, held in the mansion's garden with Salvatore officiating and tears of joy streaming down his weathered cheeks. Carmen had cried through the entire ceremony, and even Andre had been seen wiping his eyes during the vows. Now, watching Adriano push their 3-year-old daughter Sofia on the swing set he'd installed next to Salvatore's vegetable garden, Marina marveled at how much their lives had changed. The little girl had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn streak, and she had both men wrapped completely around her tiny finger. "Papai higher," Sofia demanded in the mix of Portuguese, Italian, and English that was her natural language. "Any higher and you'll fly away, Principessa," Adriano laughed, but he pushed the swing a little higher anyway. Salvatore, now 81 and still sharp despite his occasional confusion, sat beside Marina on the patio. "You saved us all, you know," he said quietly. "That day in the park, you didn't just find a lost old man. You found our hearts." Marina squeezed his hand, watching her husband and daughter with infinite love. No, you saved me." And that's how a simple act of kindness in a Miami park changed 3 lives forever here at Passion and Power. Love truly can bloom in the most unexpected places, even between worlds that should never collide. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of dangerous love and second chances. Your support keeps these stories coming. Until next time, keep believing in love.